Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. Feel free to turn your cameras on if you're able to. If not, no worries. We are so excited to be here with all of you. And feel free to just, pop in a message, tell us your name, tell us where you're from, where you're joining us. We really want this to be a collaborative and informal space for all of us to, share our ideas and share, our experiences. Awesome. Okay, well, we're just gonna get started here. So we're gonna go through, oh, sorry, before we go any further, I just want to say that this event is going to be recorded. So if you're uncomfortable with that, then please do let me know. And if you would like to speak, then I can stop the recording when you want to speak and then turn it back on afterwards. So please let us know if that's okay or not okay. And then we'd love to be able to take a little screenshot of all of us, just kind of to get this started. So who's ever able to turn their cameras on, that's awesome. Wants to pop in just for a little picture, so that would be great. Okay, well, everyone's fine. For anyone who's just joined, we're just taking, a quick picture and then we will get started. Okay. Awesome. Okay. Well, with that, welcome to the Global Roundtable on Period Poverty. We are so excited to be talking with you guys today about a subject that is often neglected and dismissed to be talking about on the international level or even in terms of kind of a political and policy response. So I am really excited. And, please thank you, Jennifer, drop your information in here. Tell us where you're listening from. Tell us, why is period poverty important to you, and your experiences. This is an informal and collaborative discussion. So with that, we're just going to start with a few quick introductions just to let you all know who we are and who, our main speakers will be today. So introducing myself, hello, I'm Shira Graubart. I'm president of Girl Up Edinburgh. Girl Up is a UN Foundation campaign with campuses, 3,000 plus campuses all around the world. And we are lucky to be joined here with Girl Up Strathclyde, who's also a Girl Up group also based in Scotland. And we really focus a lot on empowerment and training women and girls to be the next leaders of the new wave of feminist activists. So Girl Up has partnered with Black Ed Movement, an anti-racism movement that's based in Edinburgh, to create Black feminist space. That's created a bunch of different initiatives and projects from there, and one of them being BFS Model UN. So I'm going to pass it to Nia and Embla to share a little bit about BFS and UN. All of the kind of links and socials to all this will be in the chat, so keep up with everything. Give it to you.
Hello, everybody. I'm Nia, as Embla mentioned. Not Embla, Shira mentioned. Sorry. Sorry. So a little bit about BFSMN. So BFSMN is the Black Feminist Space Model MUN. And so if you're not familiar with what Model MUN is, it is sort of a miniature United Nations and sort of debate and resolution group that aims to resolve global issues in a sort of formal, sustainable fashion through the lens of different operative states. But BFS is sort of the answer to the gap in the sort of MUN and debate scene for spaces that are concerned primarily with the problems that marginalized people face and sort of acknowledging the nuance of solving those problems in modernity. And we are a largely educational space, but we do host a number of debates that aim to resolve these issues. So whether you're new to MUN or debate in general, we are very happy to have you if you would like to join us. And Embla kindly linked our socials in the chat, so if you're interested to check us out, please do.
Yeah, if you just scroll up a bit, you'll find information both for Black Feminist Space and for Black Feminist Space MUN. Yeah, as Nia was saying, BFS MUN was born out of an interest to create an academic space of debate that mimics the real world United Nations with the kind of respect and focus that should be given in the real world to issues of marginalized people and marginalized topics. So that's really the focus of BFS MUN, to kind of create the world that we want to live in when we graduate university.
Great, thank you so much, Embla and Nia. And I'm going to pass it to Melissa from Women in Debates, who has started this incredible organization. Let's hear a little bit from her.
So hi everyone, thank you for coming. So my name is Melissa. I am the founder of Women in Debate. So it's a platform for women from all around the world who would like to meet up online and just discuss about any society issues or any other topics that they feel concerned about. So we usually organize one session every week, and the purpose is to create a safe and friendly space where every woman can just share their vision, their experience, or their perspective on any topics that we are actually organizing. So feel free to follow us on Instagram or Twitter if you're interested, and thank you so much.
Thank you, Melissa. And now I'll pass it to Martine from the Linda Initiative.
Hello everyone, so my name is Martine Irakose, and I'm a student at the University of Edinburgh as well. And so I co-founded this organization called Linda, which means protect in Swahili, because we tackle sexual reproductive health issues that young people face in Kenya by providing them correct information and breaking the stigma. As you all know, it's so hard. I don't know how many of you are African here, but it's so hard to talk about these topics at home or even at school. So we thought of, let's be rebellious, and we actually start doing that. It's time, and we break all this taboo around it. So we have a platform online where we provide myths versus facts or information, but on the ground we do outreaches to schools where we provide information about different topics. But currently now we are creating a text messaging platform where young people can text to our advisors anonymously, and they get responses they want. Because we've realized that after the the pandemic happened, most students were at home and not at school. So we are shifting we are going where they are, basically. We are following them. Yeah, that's it.
Well, thank you so much, Martine. And now I'll pass it to Sanitary.
Thank you, Shira. Sanitary is an Edinburgh and Jaipur-based social enterprise which works to tackle period poverty by creating and manufacturing our own sustainable, reusable pads, which we make out in Jaipur. Our beneficiaries make them. And we aim to do cross-cutting work to tackle the stigma here in Edinburgh and in Jaipur. And our most recent work involved working on the campaign for free period products here in Scotland, which of course we know went well, so that was very exciting. And recently in the first lockdown, we had derived a fundraise to be able to distribute our pads across food banks in Edinburgh. And so we're excited to hear what everyone has to share, and we're going to share our co-director here, Hannah over here, and the development officer, and Amanda, our other co-director, are going to talk about what they've learned with running social enterprise. So yes, thank you for having us. And yes, also we have our Instagram and our website also in the chat, so do click away. Very exciting, nice Instagram for everyone to enjoy, so do check us out.
Thank you, Bella. And for those who are just joining us right now, we are just finishing up some introductions. Feel free to pop in the chat where your name, where you're listening from, and what period poverty means to you. And then last but not least, I'll pass it on to Girl Up Strathclyde.
Hi, I'm Emily. I'm from Girl Up Strathclyde. So you probably will have heard all of what Girl Up Girl Up is about generally from Shira, because she did a really good job of explaining it, so I won't go through that again. But yeah, we are based in Glasgow, so we're working sort of to build community with the students there and have open discussions about all different topics, mostly to do with feminism. So we've been doing that through sort of book clubs and things like that, sort of get the ball rolling with some conversations that maybe people aren't always comfortable with, but it's really important to have the conversations about. So yeah, we were really excited to be involved with this as well, because this is like a great example of that really important thing to be talking about. So yeah, happy to be here. And our socials are in the chat as well.
Awesome. Thank you, guys. Thank you all so much. So, just to reiterate once again, feel free to, share your perspectives, share your opinions. This is a global roundtable. Period poverty looks so different all around the world, and we're here to share our experiences and hear experiences that we're not so familiar with. So with that, kind of how we're kind of going to structure this so far, and just we'll see how it goes. So please, have your opinions, like tell us what you're thinking and how you're feeling. So we'll start just with women in debates. Melissa we'll go through kind of a few presentations, about what period poverty looks like in certain areas of the world, in certain countries, and then kind of global or regional strategies to addressing it.
So I'm coming from south of France, so I will mainly talk about my country. Actually, period product became a necessity product in 2015 only. So it means that they lowered the tax that is imposed for every product. So it passed from 20% tax to 5.5% taxes, which is actually related, like before the period product, there was the necessity taxes on, for example, candies or foie gras or even truffles. So it was a huge step up, but it was as well mainly the project was mainly led by other associations that are not from the government. So every time that there is a first step for women's rights, it's mainly coming from outside association, because the government is not really on it. And the thing was that even though the project, the price get lower because of the taxes, they realized that it only get lower from 12%, because actually the companies increase then the price. So it mainly benefit to the companies more than it was for people. And period poverty, they estimate that it concerns 1.7 million women in France. So which is actually still quite huge. And when they are talking about period poverty, they don't only talk about the product like tampons or cup, but they talk as well about everything that is around it, such as follow-up as a gynecologist, painkiller, and as well had to use other projects and had to buy like clothes when they've been actually damaged by the blood and like all the stuff. So it's not only about buying your product in the supermarket, but it's like a whole ecosystem that is around it. And all we can say is that whenever we're seeing actually an advertisement and at the TV, they don't represent the blood. They use this blue liquid. And then the women are wearing the period product and they are feeling so fresh, and they are climbing mountains, and they're running away everywhere, and they're feeling like this is the best thing happening to them. And so there is a real taboo still existing on it. So it feels like we're trying little by little to change, and the government is debating on trying to give free products in public spaces such as university, school, and hospital. So it's still ongoing apparently. Yes, and that's globally how the situation here is, but it's as well mainly. It's representing a huge budget. They say that it's around 500 euros per year. for women. So it's the one that are targeted are, first of all, the homeless women who, first of all, they don't have access to the product because they don't have money, and then they as well don't have access to places when they can change themselves. Then we have the students as well, and then we have just the women who are below the poverty revenue. So it's like a global issue as well, and it seems that hopefully they are working on it for better days coming.
Thank you so much, Melissa. I mean, that was very, very informative, very interesting to hear. It really stuck out to me, the influence that, civil society and especially these advocacy groups really have, in lobbying the government to make changes. Because, patriarchal institutions, why would they? So I think, and then, hearing all of that, as well as looking in the chat here and seeing how many, great attendees we have who are involved in efforts all around the world, really, some hope, but also shows how important it is, all of the work that we're all doing in our different regions. So if anyone else wants to jump on that or share how is it's either experiences different, similar in any place, and then if not, we'll pass it to Martine from the Linda Initiative.
I'm on echo. Sorry. I guess what I found was really interesting was your idea about advertisement, and I think with the blue liquid, and I think that's like something that's only more recently we're kind of discussing how much that's impacted the way that we view our periods. And I think like for so long, so much of the advertisement company organizers and leaders of that kind of sector were all men as well, and the implications that has on I guess how girls are viewing how their period should be, and in the sense of them being white and scented and disposable. I guess for us working at Sanitary, the implications that has for I guess communicating why people should make the switch. It's really interesting to see how much that kind of advertisement has really made a difference in the way people view, periods and the way they should be. I think comes significantly from kind of like what we've kind of been taking in subconsciously through advertisement. So it's really, I think, yeah, definitely on the side of like selling pads and reusable pads, that's kind of a barrier that we often come across, is the effects of advertisement, for sure, which is really interesting.
Just building on from that, like I remember this being a really big thing, and it came into the media ages ago, where like in video games and things like that, in order to make them PG, they wouldn't have like the evil characters and zombies and that being killed and there actually being blood. They had it green because blood was too PG. And this whole idea that a period is something that can only be discussed by adults is so toxic. It's like, if something like that happens naturally every day to somebody under 18, surely it can't be a PG subject. It's something that needs to be discussed before that. It needs to be aware of, and it shouldn't be horrifying and it shouldn't be shocking.
Yeah, I mean, personally, I completely agree with that. So I've grown up in India. I've done all of my schooling in India, and I definitely relate to what Melissa said about the advertisements, always like kind of showing blood as not being red, but blue. And even, if I would go to buy like sanitary pads, the shopkeepers would be like, they would wrap it up and hide it completely so that it's not visible to any other customers. And I remember for the longest time, I wasn't even allowed to go out and buy pads because my family thought that maybe, the shopkeepers or, the vendors would just not feel, I don't know, maybe they would like feel awkward about it. So a lot of times it would be my mother or my father. So I just felt like, what's like really wrong with that? And I think, yeah, same with schools. We were never really made comfortable speaking about periods, even with our teachers. teachers. But yeah, you should expect that, if you're spending so much time in school, you're spending like half the day in school, and if you are on your period, it should be something that you're comfortable talking about. It should be an open experience. But yeah, so I completely like agree with what Melissa said about the advertisement specifically. So yeah.
It reminded me also how I used to go to buy like pads at night. You wait specifically at night, so it's very calculated. The speed, everything, the distance, because you don't want people to see you with a pad, and because they start looking at you as if it's something unusual, and just like start building this shame around it. So already affording it is a problem. Now, like, if you put it if you are putting that like boundary of access, easy access, so that's just reminded me some memories. Yeah, sorry.
Just going on about kind of this like sanitization of menstruation through like the blue liquid, there's something really powerful about using reusable products and like washing out your own blood and getting comfortable with that. And yeah, I mean, obviously like with disposable pads, it's like it happens and we just throw it away and we don't think about it, but reusable pads really forces you to confront that, which is powerful, as I said.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting, Amy, because I think, I mean, obviously there are a lot of problems with throwing away, the fact that what we access the most are throw away things, but the fact that you kind of, it makes you sort of look at things less. But the reality is just like a lot more bloody, which I think for some it's fine, but then for a lot of people it's like, for reasons out of their control, like that's still like so horrible to people. But if anyone's used one of our sanitary pads, there's a lot of blood there. There's a lot of blood. But as soon as like you kind of get used to that, you realize there's nothing to it. But I think there are so many reasons why we're at all worried about that in the first place, which is just sort of so complex.
Yeah, so I recently switched to like using, well, not recently, but like a few years ago, I switched to using the cup. And at first it's quite like jarring to like clean out your own blood because you don't realize how much there is. But I've come to like really become comfortable with it. And when I try to get people or when I try to tell them like, oh, it's so much better and so much more comfortable, like the main reason I find that they don't want to switch is because they think it's kind of nasty or gross to like clean out the blood. It's like you can really see the problem there with like disposable pads. You just throw it away, and we start to see like the period blood as like gross, but it shouldn't be like that. Yeah.
Interesting.
It's weird in a way that like we sort of, through marketing, people who menstruate have had to sort of go through this kind of indoctrination process of their periods having to be something that are digestible to other people, that like even to ourselves they sort of quickly become these things that exist sort of within the realms of like really disgusting, but I kind of have to go through it, and I don't really want to have to tell anybody that I go through this, but I kind of have to discuss it with other people for like a number of reasons. And it's strange that it's sort of like the autonomy of people who menstruate is all completely dependent on how our menstruation is marketed back to us by people who only experience menstruation as a commodity for capital rather than as a life experience. And so I think, Amy, sort of what you were saying about how there's a bit of like power in like cleaning out your blood and like seeing your blood yourself, it's in some ways sort of like an act of defiance, I feel like.
I think definitely in the sense of the act of defiance, because I remember having going on a talk that was organised by Wen, and kind of she sort of started her talk for ambassadors with kind of beginning like situating it within like the history of menstrual products, which I thought was such a really like interesting way to kind of like sort of see, I guess, like the empowering side and the agency that we have with our choices, in the sense that she kind of explained that the rise, particularly in the UK and Europe, of like single-use disposable pads was like post-World War, and it was used because of excess bandages, and a man made this company that kind of boomed into what we kind of now see as like single-use plastic pads, and kind of seeing it, the history of how it devolved, so separate from, I guess, the menstruator's own experience, and so much for, like you said, like profit. And I think as soon as you kind of situate it within the history of menstrual products, and with that, you kind of begin to be able to see your own place within it, and then see the kind of the impacts of what your choices can have in this kind of long kind of chronological history of us not having these choices, and for so many different reasons. So it's really interesting to kind of like put it in that kind of, I guess.
Just to build on what you were saying, Hannah, about how it's like, because obviously a massive part of period dignity is product choice, and reusables can be such a massive part of that, but really like taking ownership over any product you use is like a really private form of activism that sort of carries its own weight in and of itself. And I don't know about you guys, but like I never grew up thinking that this was something that it was something that was just told, like, this is the solution to this thing that's happened to you now. But it's not the same as like a pill or something else. Like, as a product, like, it is a very personal thing, and like looking at your own blood is like a very personal thing. And I think it's so crazy that we've been raised to like really sanitize it, I guess. And so I do see it as like a sort of like act of resistance. Yeah, sort of what you were saying as well, Nia, about it, like sort of claiming these products for yourself, and finding ones that actually make you comfortable and sort of like fit into your daily life and against, like, in alignment with your principles. It's crazy that we didn't seek that or demand that before.
Yeah, that really brings me back to, I think it was like the second wave of feminism main kind of tagline, like the personal is the political. Martine, I was wondering if you wanted to share if, any of this is similar, how this compares to, your area and the research that you have worked on.
So our organization works mainly in Kenya and within East Africa. So the experience I'm going to bring on is from that region specifically. Some of the stuff will be similar to what Melissa said. So first, today I met around like 3 people, and I told them about this event, and they asked me what is period poverty. And I was like, I was promoting, I even forgot to define what is period poverty. So we get caught in this lingo, and then because we're passionate about it, but then people don't know what it means. So I hope everyone knows what it means. If not, I don't know. If not, so period poverty is basically the fact that most people who menstruate don't have access to or cannot afford to have menstrual product. I think simple as that. So so from where I'm from, I'm going to first start with the type of products we use and what the challenges come to it. That's how the presentation will be about. So the first, we have the commercially premium products, usually from like large multinationals. So we have like Always, pads, and they're most of the time reusable. So those ones, the main challenge is that they're not affordable at all. It's like, I think there was a research from Bill Gates Foundation saying that 80% of people menstruating in Kenya cannot afford, like, basically like these pads from Always, which is a problem because most young girls, then they start engaging in transactional sex to be able to afford these pads. And I think 2 out of 3 young girls in Kenya engage in transactional sex just to afford pads. And in return, they are abused, and they felt pregnant, which is brings in even more issues. So it's like a cycle that continues. And the second type of product we have is like on the market. It's like low cost, commercially reusable reusable pads. So usually they are manufactured by social enterprises, small social enterprises who take on this issue at heart and they want to solve it in the long term. Those ones, for instance, let's say Zana Foundation, the main challenge for them is that they're not scalable and their quality is not trusted to be good. So it's yes, yeah. So it's very. I'm responding to issue. Yes. So their main problem is that they're not scalable. They're small and they're not trusted to be good quality. So that's why most people don't know about these low-cost commercial products and cannot access them. And the third type is basically the commercial reusable pads like sanitary, for instance. And the challenge is that it brings in, these reusable pads bring in more costs sometimes than it intended to do in the first place. For instance, soap, clean water, all of that, like bringing more burden, and sometimes deepens the period poverty issue. So most organizations, they look at that holistically and they provide kits like menstrual product kits, but it's not scalable in the long term as well, because you have to factor in all of those things. And lastly, we have the homemade alternatives. These are the worst. I've known them. I know stories. Basically, use clothes, mattresses, cotton, everything. If you go to a public bathroom and you see toilet paper, we use that. I can go on. And as you know, those are not hygienic and they can cause issues. Those alternatives are not even worth to be mentioned. So those are the 4 types of products we have on the East African market or even the African market, and the challenges for people who menstruate to access them. Lastly, I want to talk about what's happening with the government. In the case of Kenya, the problem we have is that there is a cosmetic action plan going on. For instance, I think they abolished the tampon tax 2004. They introduced they introduced the free menstrual products in schools in 2017, but still not a reality. So it's all cosmetic and they want to adhere to international regulations, but in action, still 80% of people menstruating in Kenya cannot afford menstrual products. So that's an issue we have. If you compare it, I would say it looks like the Edinburgh sun. It's there, but it's not hot. It doesn't do anything. It's cold. So we have the legislations, nothing is being done. So that's the end. So the products we have, the challenges, and on the government level, what's being done and not being done. Yeah.
I would just have a question for you. Do you think is your government mainly composed by men in Kenya, or there is women as well? And if so, do you think that this is what is impacting, or do you think that it's more about cultural?
There is, even if there is women in the government, there's something called internalized misogyny, where women even internalize these issues as or culturally unspeakable, or why would we care, because they grew up in that in that culture. So even if they are there, they may not be doing much, but there are many women in the government pushing for that, but the majority, as you said, are old men in the 50s, 60s, and we know they are basically the product of their time. Let's say that. Yeah. And the main issue we have is the corruption, I think, because they had 200 million in 2017 to address the free menstrual products in schools, but God knows where that is. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Martine, for sharing that. I mean, and Melissa, you bring up an important element, like you're talking about government and the media before, and how each of these institutions and how the male-dominated nature, the gendered nature of these institutions kind of like work together to further silence, further stigmatize, or just kind of the image-making purposes, kind of like a fake commitment. And then also in terms of how doing all these kind of cosmetic legislation and kind of outwardly image making actions and policies to kind of gain international support and attention can really just be faulty. So it's a great point to really important to look at what the legislation is there versus how it's actually being implemented. So sanitary, I was wondering if you guys want to share a little bit about, some of your work and, talking about, what Martine brought up with the reusable pads and how you guys have been able to get through the barrier of, what kind of the privileges that go into even being able to use reusable pads.
Do you want to speak on this one? Sorry,
Amy, you go for it.
No, I was just going to say Issue is probably best to speak on this. Issue is our project partner in Jaipur, who runs the Her Shakti Centre, which is the workshop where the women work. Issue, do you want to say?
I'm sorry, I missed the question. What am I answering? Hello?
Yeah, just about, how period poverty, like what period poverty looks like in Jaipur, and, how you guys have kind of worked through the privileges that, people already need to have in order to be able to use reusables.
Yeah, I mean, let's compare it to Kenya. We're not different. We're not much way different. We are still suffering with a lot of taboos. We're still suffering with, policies being on paper but not being implemented. And if you go to see the ground reality of it, what government is providing is the cheapest plastic pad available. Like, they would buy a contract and then they would distribute it in the government schools, and that's how girls would access their period product. It may be safe, it may not be safe. On my ground researches from past few years, I myself tried a lot of pads from what is being provided, and not not all of them are like up to the mark, even though they're like plastic ones, but they're like of the cheap most quality. There's a big business transaction that happens with the government and all these pad producers, which is not very ethical. And also the companies, big brand companies, it could be like Stay Free, Whisper, whatever the top brands are. We have also realized that not their product is not also up to the mark. Lot of girls are facing allergies, and the thing is, in the recent years, what has happened is there was a movie that released, The Padman. I'm not sure if you have seen it. And there was a documentary which went viral, right? Period, end of sentence. So there was a huge movement where right from say 22%, 24%, the margin has shifted to like 36% of women using menstrual products, mostly pads. So in their eyes, in their image, what they see that, okay, the disposable plastic pad is the highest quality of a period product that they could think of. There is very less awareness about what kind of disposable pads are also available in the market. What are the alter options? Is like, it's gone up to the standards where if they see their own blood, they are like very hesitant. They feel that their own blood is gross. apart from that, there's a huge number, which is 64%, which is still, they're still on using clothes, and there's a list of other products, non-hygienic products that um, my friend from Kenya also mentioned. So it's the same. And India is a country with great diversity in geographical regions and everything. It's very, very difficult to kind of, make sure we have reached, all the kind of corners of country, whether it could be, tribes, or it could be some people in the mountain, it could be some people from the beach side, and different climatic conditions, and each culture with various kind of taboos that they're not stuck with. It could they're going through taboos like it being called sin, being called dirty, being called a sinner, even if you're like menstruating. So I see things changing, but there's a huge force that will be required in order to really educate and spread awareness about what are the options, right? Real options, and the affordability gap has to be decreased. Also, the correct knowledge about what is menstruation and all those MHM practices, and how to dispose your product, how to kind of care about it. It's not about just giving free. So what government has been doing is like giving out free products, but there is no correct education about like how to dispose it, or there is no system in place which could really look after where the menstrual waste is going, how it's going to the landfill. So there's a big team that will be required really to make a great change, make a big change at this moment. And I think India is ready for it.
Yeah, and just if I can jump on what you said about the project themselves. For example, in France, normally you have the obligation to name all the components of any project, including alcohol and cigarettes. But for period project, there is no obligation about that. So as the fact that it shows that the company themselves make a taboo of what do you use to protect yourself, and then the government don't give the obligation for the companies to show, then I feel like it's creating the whole taboo around it even more, that is supported by the government itself and by the companies themselves as well. So then it's hard then to educate young girls and the consequence when they don't even know what they're using, on what they can use, what they cannot use, and how to use it, because we don't even know what we are using. And so that's how we have as well this huge gap between luxury period projects and other projects where they're not really like, we don't really know, and the quality seems very low as well. So then it increases even more the gap of then period poverty, because there's only few projects that you feel like would be good quality because they're using plastic instead of cardboard. So it's, I mean, the whole taboo is even, I feel like the whole taboo is even created by the institution themselves before it's by the people and the girls and the men.
Absolutely, you're right.
Just to like jump off of the, oh sorry, was someone going to say something? I'll just quickly say, like, there was obviously a 2014 study which found that a lot of disposable pads have really harmful chemicals and toxins in them, like I think it was like acetone, chloroform, chloromethane, like all these things that which you really don't want like anywhere near your body. And it is just remarkable that like this health product, or as it is, has all these like actually quite harmful chemicals. And I mean, just because there's like been so little study and research on it, because obviously it is a women's issue, and we know if it was a man's issue, that wouldn't be happening.
I don't know if I should share a bit more about Sanitary's own experience now, or whether we want to kind of compare. But I guess I kind of here to speak about a little bit more to do with our work that we really were fortunate to do in Malawi this year. And by no means do Sanitary have the capabilities to kind of express the Malawian experience, but we can certainly have a go at talking through the really well, I don't know, I think Sanitary felt very, very privileged to be part of this project that we got involved in, which saw 350 schoolgirls in southern Malawi, in schools, Pempera, Chankenzi, and then a local NGO as well, all based along Lake Malawi, have 350 girls given our kits. And I think this was a really great experience for us, and I think really showed the importance of, I guess for us as an international NGO based in Scotland and Jaipur, to make sure that any projects that we were involved in were tailor-made to suit that context, and also led by local NGOs. And we were really, really privileged to have these contacts in Malawi to do so. And I guess I don't know, the big kind of message that I would say in terms of what we learn in this is that I think as like period poverty becomes a more mainstream thing to talk about, particularly, fortunately enough, if we make it very specific, let's say Scotland, it's becoming more and more mainstream to talk about that. And what follows that is the idea of actually looking at period poverty as certainly not something that is only affecting developing countries, that is a global issue, and that is something that we're really grateful to be on the forefront, I hope, of everyone's minds here, but generally just at the forefront of these like recent debates. But I think one thing that we at Sanitary are very aware of, and a part of team discussions, that actually, like, just because it's a global issue and a universal issue, it doesn't mean that any sort of solutions to period poverty are a one size fits all. And I think that situating period poverty and access to period products within wider situations of poverty and access to like sanitation and water and all these, and you know, all these basic things makes you realize that like any solution to period poverty has to be part of these wider conversations of what the context is and what the, you know, what the availability is. And that was something that we definitely dealt with in Malawi, because the situation is very different to the situation in Jaipur. And one of the big things that we were looking at, I guess, was, this is during COVID, was the kind of impact of having period products as a to help with re-enrollment back into schools. And I think this is going to be a part of and maybe another discussion about the impacts of COVID in terms of period poverty. But I think that was a really insightful experience for us at Sanitary, because I think it really hammered home the kind of contextual element of period poverty and and how solutions have to be tailor-made and locally run. Yeah, and I guess to spotlight a couple of really great organizations in Malawi, there's Supreme Malawi, which is a social enterprise run by Malawian women making pads, which is, and there's so many great kind of social enterprises out there doing really great things to kind of combat that and that contextual thing. But that's kind of me from the kind of our recent project in Malawi. I don't know if Amy and Manzi want to jump on any more.
Can I just ask a quick question, please? I know Ishi was talking about like the education of the girls, and I suppose this really like spreads out to all of you. How have you found like people's willingness to actually be educated about period poverty? Because obviously this is not something that they would ever really consider or see as like something that they're doing wrong, like they're using the toilet paper. They might not know that that's not something that's acceptable. So I just wanted to know like how people have like taken it when you go in and you say, here are some sanitary towels, or here are some reusable whatever, how they sort of react to that, and whether they take it on board or whether it's a bit of like a uphill struggle getting them to understand that this is...
I think this kind of answer goes directly to in Sanitari's context of working in Malawi, was the fact that like it was very much, we were producing the pads, but it was very much luckily we had a contact, Enifa, who led all the distribution. So Enifa grew up in southern Malawi and was very much, and this goes back to the implementation side of things, making sure that it's never an imposition, and then it's fitting to the context and locally run. And the experience that I had with the community, very much on the logistics and manufacturing side of things for Sanitary's role, was really, really positive. In the headmasters that we spoke to at the schools were all really, really keen to kind of engage in these kind of conversations and to kind of show the implications on school attendance when it comes to period poverty, and then to follow up with us and show, look, we want to show you how much school attendance has risen. So I think the engagement I think Sanitary had with our partners in Malawi was incredibly positive, in the sense of it was a real dialogue between them, and it was a really learned experience for us. And yeah, we gained some really like interesting insights, and they were very much, showing us all the kind of like, new things to kind of take on board, which was really interesting, for sure.
Yeah, and in terms of like speaking to communities in Jaipur, as we said, all our community outreaches are very tailor-made. We actually have to study the community, what are their problems, and like speak to a few women beforehand. So it's never a one program for all. So we have to study, okay, what are the problems? Sometimes we really need to, because they don't know they're suffering. For example, they are they're using the normal disposable pads, but only when you speak to them and ask them, like, do you get the itching, do you get the rash, do you have like disposable issue, only then they will like kind of start speaking. And also when we enter it, just in India especially, you cannot really speak about menstruation directly to a woman or anybody else in the community. So we really have to like kind of create the whole safe space of conversation between them, and then we have to assure them that we are there for them and for their benefit. And however, at the end of session, they're going to be taking something back, like whether it's values or lessons, how to take care of their body. Well, it's like most of the time, not everyone is open to like receiving another lecture, but we really have to engage. There is a very ice breaking sessions that we do, so it gets them started, and we started with all the giggles, and so it happens very organically, and we have to like slide our topic in and then really talk about the main topic and the whole aspect of it throughout the session. So it has to be very customized, like especially in India. And I think with Malawi it happened because obviously there was a local somewhere. But for example, there was Martha and Amy and Kate from Sanitary visited India. But obviously I was there for translating, and then I would understand what they are trying to say, and then I would see, and they would get surprised and shocked each time the beneficiaries or someone from the community say something, like how they have been experiencing, what they have been practicing. So there's new surprises, there's new things we also learn from the community. Like, okay, this is also happening with each session, so it's always customized.
To complete that, Bethan, for instance, I've had many organizations when I was in high school. They bring the alternative to disposable pads. The first were the cups. That one, all the girls were like no, because you have to understand first of all, you're not introducing one thing, you're introducing like another issue, which is the virginity myth. So you have to think like 2 steps ahead and actually first introduce that before you introduce the cup. Or if you introduce a tampon, first introduce the virginity myth, how, for instance, scientifically it's not proven, and then you introduce the cup. So it's like you have to think 2 steps ahead of what are the cultural barriers to that. So it has to be really like someone who knows the community and be creative, or someone who was born there, for instance. And the other alternative was the reusable pad. At first it seems okay. The girls were like, okay, how am I going to dry it? Because I don't have a drying machine and I cannot put it outside under the sun. And they were like, no. So the barrier, so again, you have to think about this problem beforehand. So first of all, you have then to introduce, for instance, like a solution. For instance, we were told if you are ashamed of putting the reusable pad outside to be like to be dried, because few people have like drying machines. So they were told to put that, for instance, in a basket and putting it somewhere high outside. No one will see it. So you have to introduce that solution and then introduce the reusable pad. So it's always working backwards, and like it's like chess, like 2 steps ahead, and then you work backwards, and then you provide a solution. Never go, oh, we have a reusable pad. In their brain, they're already thinking about the barriers. How am I going to wash it? How am I going to dry it? So, yeah.
Yeah, and I believe that the main thing is actually education, is how we educate girls and men about that, about how to use the product, about what it has as effect on your body, and to break the barriers and everything. And I feel like instead of presenting a product, instead of advertising a product, the society should consider first how should we educate young girls and young guys, young boys about it, because I really believe as well the impact of men in the whole process, because they then one day they become father, or then they become boyfriends whenever the father is not here, and then they can have as well impact on, I mean, they can influence as well the young girl somehow. Sometimes this is how it's happening. So I actually believe that the main solution is to start by educating via school, at school, and then probably can start breaking the taboo little by little.
As you're saying, sorry. As you're saying, Melissa, as well, with the taboo of it all, I think that getting men involved will also help lessen the taboo when everyone finds this to be a completely natural thing. And also, as you bring in men, I think it's important to also notice that, or to note that we're not really only talking about women and girls when we talk about people who menstruate. There's a whole non-binary, gender fluid community who also menstruate, and it's important we keep them in mind as well as we're debating period poverty.
Yeah, like just adding on to that as well, it's always the case now that guys, I've always found that when you discuss issues like this, a lot of the myths about it end up coming from guys who are all talking to each other, and they never think to actually check with the women in their lives to see if this is the case, because, you know, it's like girls talk to girls, you know, stereotypically, girls talk to girls, guys talk to guys, and a lot of guys are still very, very shy about a lot of these things, and they don't really like to talk about it. They feel like if they have to ask, then they're already too stupid to understand, so they'll come to their own assumptions, which to us seem so unreasonable and don't make sense. But for them, it's completely reasonable because they don't realize. And in my mind, it doesn't make any sense as well in terms of sex education. At least I didn't experience this because I went to an all-girls school, but we were frequently told that, like, in mixed schools, the girls and the guys were taught separately. So the girls would find out what happened to them, the guys would find out what happened to them. Now, that doesn't make sense to me, because at some point you're going to have to encounter the other, and you're probably going to have to try and understand what's happening. And if you haven't got that understanding from a basic level, then it's much harder to try and learn it again when you're older. As well as all this, there's plenty of these men, like anyone who's not educated of it, they're going to end up going into later life, into professions where they could easily encounter it. Like there's plenty of doctors who aren't aware of some of the ins and outs until they get to medical school. Teachers who no doubt will have menstruating pupils. Like it's almost guaranteed you're going to interact with it at some point, and to just be like, no, you don't need to know about that. Like that's ridiculous. It's not an excuse. Just because you don't experience something doesn't mean you shouldn't know about it. So yeah.
I just wanted
Absolutely.
sorry. Hi. I just wanted to thank you for the person who raised about non-binary people who experience periods. I'm very sorry I didn't catch your name. But thank you so much for raising that. I know that some people have been chatting about the Scottish Youth Parliament's position on the period products bill. I'm absolutely more than happy to discuss that with anyone if anyone's interested. But that is one of the main things that we were fighting for, was period products should be available for everyone, no matter your gender identity, no matter who you are, they should be available for everyone. So whether that means in gender neutral toilets, in schools, in sports centres, wherever. And I just think that's really important. So thank you so much for raising that.
And obviously the thing is with period poverty is it does affect the most marginalised in society, and like trans and non-binary menstruators will experience so much more heightened difficulties and stigma in accessing these products, especially, and that really kind of brings into question the points of access, because like just putting them in bathrooms doesn't necessarily work for trans and non-binary menstruators, so then they need to be in kind of other places which are easier to access.
Yeah, and add to that very unhelpful comments, as we saw from people like J.K. Rowling last year, it becomes like both a point of access issue, a structural issue because, you know, of the likelihood of being unable to afford items like this, or maybe having sort of like less stability and security. And then the fact that marketing wise, we never see representation of all bodies who experience periods, and the existing dysmorphia that many people who have wombs feel like experiencing a period for the first time. Like it's just it's an area that I feel like you know, everyone in the field like is so behind on, and these conversations just like need to keep happening in as inclusive way as possible.
It's really fascinating because so BFSmen sort of wanted to go about researching on the issue from the standpoint of analysing what sort of like global organisations are sort of doing to tackle the issue. So most importantly, we were concerned with the actions of the UN, who we like typically associate with, you know, sort of being the mediators and those that like help to push to resolve global issues. And so period poverty is something that is sort of dealt with primarily by the UNFPA. So that's the United Nations Population Fund. It's their sexual and reproductive health sort of agency. And it's really fascinating how gender exclusive the language is that they use to describe period poverty as an issue. And even in their sort of praxis towards trying to deal with the matter, it's very, very trans exclusionary. So for example, they outline that they aim to reach women and girls, which is already a problem, to sort of attempt to distribute emergency kits and humanitarian emergency circumstances and so on and so forth. And one really important note that I found in that reading was from a Karina Tull in Period Poverty's Impact on the Economic Empowerment of Women. She sort of noted that there is really no research on the experiences of varying populations. Like period poverty is always looked at from a lens of the practice of white feminism. So we're concerned largely with the experiences of cisgender women in Western countries. We're not really looking at migrants and refugees and how they experience period poverty moving to a foreign state. We don't really talk about individuals deprived of liberty. So people incarcerated, how do they experience period poverty and lack of access whilst incarcerated? We're not concerned with menstruators with disabilities, or transgender, queer, or non-binary menstruators. And so if you ignore that sort of intersectional approach, you're not dealing with the issue. As Martine put it earlier, it's a very cosmetic resolution. It's not a, it's superficial and not sustainable. Although in their faults, they do obviously have some really sustainable, great things that they're doing. So for example, using distribution as a means of dealing with humanitarian emergencies, and not that sort of being like the be all and end all, because obviously distribution of disposable period products is not sustainable in the long term. Once those products run out, what happens then? When people have to begin to confront the local stigma towards periods in general, what happens then? Nothing. They go out of their way to educate and mentor on skills building, so how to actually create reusable sanitary napkins locally, and raising awareness on period cups and whatnot. But again, sort of as you get towards the tail end of what it is that they do, you kind of encounter this issue yet again where there just simply isn't enough data being put to use. The data that is being collected is sort of inconsequential, because, I mean, the needs of people who menstruate are kind of generally known. We understand what they lack and what needs to be rectified, but we don't see that enacted at all. And it's a grave concern, and it has been for a really long time. Period poverty is not like a modern issue necessarily. And yet all of this information that's sort of being gathered, okay, well, where is the practice? We have all this theory, but what is the end game here? And it's certainly not being used to put pressure on countries or states that are unwilling to deal with the issue in a substantive fashion, which I think is perhaps where BFSMN is concerned with the matter in terms of a resolution building perspective. That, you know, what is the resolution when you have all of this information? And it's quite bleak that you sort of come to realize. Dr. Verena Jean Aten, who was a former parliamentarian in the Netherlands, and she's a professor at the Hague University, sort of that period poverty isn't being prioritized as an issue because politicians don't like it, because it's not sexy. It's not feeding the hungry and having everybody see that you've fed the hungry. It's not building sustainable housing that is eco-friendly. It's not building windmills to generate hydroelectric power. It's dealing with the private lives of marginalized people, and that has never been the concern of large and powerful states, unfortunately. And so I suppose BFSMN is also really concerned with not being performative in dealing with period poverty. Like when we stage these sorts of conversations like this roundtable, which has been so amazing and insightful, even for me as someone who menstruates, this is activism, this is praxis, because it's going towards, you know, trying to deal with the issue in a sustainable fashion, as opposed to, you know, aesthetically pleasing recommendations that stop at being recommendations. So yeah, romanticise, the UN is just sort of not, or at least in my personal opinion, I can't speak for EMBLA obviously, but in my personal opinion, I think the global mediators that we typically rely on are sort of falling short of the title and the trophy that we place on them. And Martha, yes, I'll put it in the chat now.
Yeah, and I think definitely it's really easy to kind of, it is easy to be proud of Scotland's achievements, you know, as like a forerunner in tackling period poverty in a really like practical sense head on. But I think it is your point is in the sense of like governmental policies and large organizations, it's important to remember that like you've just pointed out, that like we still have to be holding them accountable and still having to kind of like repeatedly are. And I think that comes down to, like, I know Scotland, we're still waiting for the international development policy to kind of be announced properly in regards to how our it's going to affect period poverty. So I think it's putting pressure on the Scottish government to also have a really well-structured international development that like also incorporates the kind of standards that they are putting forward within Scotland in the sense of period poverty. And I think, it's just remembering we may have hit large milestones within Scotland, but it's still making sure that we're keeping our politicians and keeping our MPs and are still accountable for everything, for sure.
Thank you so much, Hannah and Nia, for bringing that up. And I mean, we could probably end up speaking for hours and hours and hours about this topic. And I thank you guys for bringing that up. We've touched upon so many different ways of addressing period poverty, and we want to introduce from March 8th to March 15th, a few organizations, some of who are on this call today, such as Sanitary and the Linda Initiative. We are organizing an international lobbying day to address period poverty. And that's going through formal routes, such as, legislative lobbying, asking for, these demands, as well as, what Martine has mentioned about implementation and how important it is to consistently hold our elected officials accountable, as well as kind of the informal elements of just how important just having these conversations are, how important spreading information and education is just so crucial, and how even just talking about periods, like saying the word. I mean, I think Embla mentioned this earlier, but I just remember seeing, it was a British parliamentarian, it was after they had taken off the luxury taxes on tampons, and he tweeted something like, why did they have to use this grotesque picture? And it was a picture of a tampon. So it's, we have a lot to work towards and a lot to do. And any final kind of last words, feel free. And if you would like to be involved in this lobby day, please reach out to girlupedinburghcampus@gmail.com. And I'll put kind of other information on that in the chat, as well as on all of our social media. And thank you again for coming. Any last comments?
Hi everyone. I just wanted to come back to what Nia just said about the UN. I used to work there. I used to work at UN Women as a consultant, and I totally agree with what you said, and I totally agree with the fact that the UN cannot and does not take into account the needs of all different groups, population groups, especially youth. They're always seen as the last issue to take into account. But I just wanted to mention one sort of special process in which you can guys give your point of view on period poverty, which is an upcoming big forum on gender equality. It's called Generation Equality. I don't know if you've heard of it. It's not UNFPA. It's convened by UN Women, and it's convened in partnership with the French government, the government from Mexico as well. And they just launched a sort of public conversation platform. And they have an action coalition specifically on sexual and reproductive health and rights. And I think that would be a very good platform for you guys to put in there your insights about period poverty, because this will be taken into account specifically in this action coalition on sexual and reproductive health and rights. And as you probably know already, especially if you've worked in Model United Nations, that the action coalitions are done, basically it's a consortium of partnerships between the private sector, civil society, and the UN and governments. And so all of these actors are going to work together. And I think that with regards to period poverty, that's a very good model to tackle this issue, in the sense that it works in partnership with private sector companies, and probably some of them could address directly this issue. So I'm just going to put in the link right now of the Generation Equality Forum website and of the public conversation platform on which you can guys give your insights. That would be great.
And we'll be sure to send up we'll be sure to send an email out that includes all of this information and all of the resources that people have been mentioning so far.
Also, I was going to give you guys some examples as well of what UN Women have done actually, but I see that we're running low on time right now. So I've linked the 3 examples of campaigns I was going to give that the UN Women have done on period poverty. One of them is exactly what you're saying, the generation equality campaign that UN Women have been doing, and they've done a piece on period poverty. And the other one is an infographic that UN Women have done on period poverty. And the third one is something that the UN Turkey has done in collaboration with UN Women on period poverty and how periods don't end during pandemics and how the pandemic has affected that. Although these are super useful sources, I would just also like to point out, as has been said already, language such as girls and women is used majority of the time. And although in the Turkey one, they do talk about, have a star, and in the bottom say that they do acknowledge the other people who menstruate as well within this. And that although, you know, this kind of activism and campaigning and information sharing is great, we need to see it in practice more often than just on social media and in campaigns. So that's what I would add to the whole UN movement with this.
Yeah. And I'm just wondering, sorry, I didn't know that we could all speak. I thought there was only actual speakers. So I actually work for the World Health Organization, but previously I worked for Women in Global Health, which is a civil society movement. And an example of how to transition policy to action, we worked with 45 governments around the world to get them to pledge to build in gender equality in the context of COVID-19 Sustainable Development Goal 5 in global health security. So there was more women, they wanted more women in leadership, we wanted safe and decent working conditions, we wanted access to menstrual products for women and girls and all those that menstruate. And we got agreements from 8 countries around the world, and we also got commitments, measurable commitments from 45 organizations, and we did that over about a 6-week period. And I think that we can, that was a lot of it was through the power of social media. We built a platform that could then leverage these relationships. I do think we can transition it. It was a lot of work, and we now have to monitor it, but it can be done. And I think in terms of the UN language as well, I know the World Health Organization has gone through quite a rapid transformation in the last 2 years. And I've been working with the head of the Sexual Reproductive Health unit to try and get them to provide free period products at the HQ in Geneva, and also with the World Health Organization Academy. They don't even have products there, and I was like, this is appalling. What we need to have products, this just shouldn't even be, this is a World Health Organization. And I think it's quite interesting because a lot of these institutions are very patriarchal, and they're so enormous. It takes such a long time to have any kind of integral change in it, and we just need to keep lobbying it from the inside. I think we can definitely make change from the inside out. So we need more UN women and any kind of WHO women to try and make these changes, but sometimes it can be pushed aside for other priorities, as we've seen with COVID. So yeah, hopefully I'll be able to give you guys an update on what will happen with the WHO, but I've got a funny feeling they'll tell me it's not a priority right now.
I was just going to sort of say, tying together what we were discussing earlier about the sort of structural elements of this issue, that it is so important. I feel like I have to remind myself after really encouraging events like this that there is an extent to which this is an echo chamber. And so it's always important for me to sort of draw everything that we learn and really see what we can bring forward. And it is so true what we've been saying is that we're dealing with, I remember when we were listening in on the parliamentary debate for the new bill, one of the things that kept coming up was people saying, oh, it's important to remember that period poverty is a form of poverty. And I was just like, of course it is. And I feel like we're not really at a place where we can sort of really draw those connections between other forms of oppression and exploitation, essentially. And a conservative MSP stood up to say, oh, you know, I took upon myself to do my own informal research on how much pads are, and was like undermining the fact that they're very expensive them. And it's just important to remember that there's still people out there who are even debating the existence, you know, and debating like who is the eligible person for handouts, you know, and like we are ultimately still fighting against those forces as well. I feel like I should have said something more encouraging to end, but yeah, that's.
I think also, Martha, the challenge is as well that, like, as much as the Sustainable Development Goals are great, they also kind of put these issues into silos. So we have Sustainable Development Goal 5 on gender equality, and period poverty should probably come under that, but the Scottish Government actually puts under Sustainable Development Goal 1 on no poverty. And I think until we can overcome this and show that there are similarities and build these, like, stop working in silos on global health and stop thinking, no, this is not a health issue, this is something the local authority needs to deal with, which is, I know, that a massive issue for what happened with the implementation of the Period Products Free Provision Scotland Act, is that the public health, all the public health teams were saying, this isn't a health issue, this is a poverty issue, it needs to be local government led. And we need to stop passing the buck and actually work together, and it's so challenging to do. And I actually think that the Sustainable Development Goals themselves almost like compound some of these challenges that we have, because they're so, the language that's used around them is putting everything into silos. So I'm hoping that we can think of ways to overcome and work in multidisciplinary approaches and overcome some of the silos that we often work in global health.
Yeah, but it's so crucial to be taking, you know, not only an intersectional but a holistic approach to addressing period poverty, and, you know, ensuring that you're even problematizing the right problem. You know, and we see a lot of these patriarchal institutions, it's easier for them to just kind of compartmentalize and say, oh, all these things are separate, because, you know, a lot of those who don't menstruate and who are men have the luxury to think like that and have the luxury to not see the holistic everyday experience that menstruators face. Well, this was incredible. I mean, this event has, and the engagement has really exceeded my wildest expectations, and I'm so grateful for everyone participating and to all who have collaborated. Please, I will be sure to send out an email kind of with all the information and links that people have been sending. I would love for this community to, you know, stay close and really connect and help and support each other with all of our activities. Lastly, just once again, if you are interested in collaborating and joining in on this International Lobbying Day to address period poverty, please email girlupedinburghcampus@gmail.com or reach out over social media. Thank you all for coming. And this will be recorded and up on our YouTube page shortly.
Thank you, Shira.
Have a lovely
day.
Thank you very much,
Shira.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, bye.
Bye, friends.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.